Catherine's Fate by Idris Shah. There once lived a very rich and generous merchant who had a gorgeous palace. The pride of his life was his daughter, a beautiful creature called Catherine. Catherine was tall and slim, with black hair and large, lustrous eyes. In the palace there were thrones of gold, chairs of silver set with precious turquoises, picture frames set with rubies, water jugs set with diamonds. All around her was luxury and beauty. Peacocks strolled in the gardens, flowers bloomed in pots hanging from the trees. All was the best that money could buy. One day, when Catherine was walking in the garden, dressed in long silken robes sewn with the finest pearls, and a cap with tassels of pearls, a very elegant-looking lady appeared before her. There was an extraordinary look about this lady. Her eyes were very penetrating and dark. Her clothes didn't seem to be anything but luminous draperies. "Catherine, my dear child," said the lady, "what would you rather have? Would you like to enjoy your life in your youth, or would you like to enjoy it in your old age? You have only these two choices." Catherine thought for a moment, and then she said, "If I have my enjoyment now, will I suffer for it in my last years?" And the tall lady said, "Yes." "But how do you know?" asked Catherine, still pondering the question. "I'm your fate," answered the apparition. "Oh, then I will have my good fortune in my old age," said Catherine. "Very well, so be it," said her fate, and vanished. Catherine thought nothing of this encounter, and returned to the house to change her clothes for something even finer. But a few days later, terrible things began to happen. There was a great storm at sea. Catherine's father had expected his ships to return from a foreign country, loaded with rich cargoes, and they were all sent by the tempest to the bottom of the sea. His warehouses were gutted by a mysterious fire, so when he decided to refit new ships, there was nothing to put in them. He hired his ships to a duke who wanted to go to war with another prince, and all the ships were sunk in an engagement with pirates. The duke's men were put to the sword, and he, too, was penniless. Thieves broke in and stole all Catherine's jewels. Her clothes had to be sold to keep them in food a little longer. At last, wretched and ill, Catherine's father died, leaving her alone in the world. Penniless and in very simple garments, Catherine decided to leave this unlucky city and find some work, if possible, in another place. So she said farewell to the city of her birth and trudged off. She eventually reached a noble city far from her own country and was standing in the street wondering which way to go. She only had a little money given to her by an old nurse and was wondering where she could buy a piece of bread. A lady of quality, looking out of her window, saw her and called out, "Who are you, my dear? And where do you come from? You are not from this part of the land." "Lady, I am all alone in the world, as my father, who was once a rich merchant, has died, and I am looking for somewhere to buy a piece of bread," she said. "Come into my house. I need a servant, and you will do very well," said the noblewoman, and Catherine went gratefully inside the big house. The lady became very fond of Catherine and trusted her with all the things she possessed. One day the mistress said to her, "I have to go out for a little while. Lock the door behind me and let no one either in or out until I return." So Catherine locked the door and sat down by the fire. No sooner had the noble woman gone than the door flew open and her fate entered. "So here are you, Catherine?" cried her fate harshly. "You have found yourself a very nice place here, have not you? Well, you can't escape me like that, you know." And she began to throw the mistress's valuable all over the floor, breaking glass and china and tearing priceless linen to pieces. "Oh, no, no, no," cried Catherine. "I shall get into the most dreadful trouble. The lady trusts me." "Oh, does she?" sneered her fate. "Well, explain this to her when she comes back then." And she ripped the long silken curtains to tatters. Catherine put her hands to her face and ran from the house, never looking back in case her fate was following. No sooner had she gone than her fate put everything back exactly as it had been before and disappeared. When the lady came back, the house was perfectly tidy, but Catherine was gone. The mistress called and called, but of course the poor girl did not hear, for she was far away. The lady looked everywhere and thought perhaps Catherine had robbed her, but nothing was missing. She could not understand what could have happened. The girl had seemed to be perfectly reliable. Now poor Catherine ran on until she reached another city, and when looking for somewhere to buy a piece of bread, was noticed by another lady standing at her window. The lady opened the window and said to her, "Where are you from? And what are you doing in this place, when so obviously you seem to be lost?" "I'm a poor girl from far away, and I am looking for something to eat, as I am very hungry," said Catherine. "Well, come into my house," said the lady. "I will feed you and clothe you, and you may have a position in my household." So Catherine went in, but the very same thing happened as before. No sooner was she settled in this house and trusted with all the valuables than her fate appeared and created chaos in a few seconds. "Do you think that there was anywhere in this world I would not to be able to find you?" cried her fate harshly, sweeping a line of priceless scent bottles to the ground and smashing them to smithereens. Catherine put her hands to her face and ran. And so it went on for the space of 7 years. Each time Catherine was taken on by some nice lady, the appearance of her fate caused her to travel on and on, endlessly, it seemed to her. But she never escaped for long. And this Catherine did not know. Her fate always restored everything to its former state the minute Catherine has disappeared. Now 7 years passed in this manner, and when Catherine was working for a very noble lady with a very kind heart, it was almost as if Catherine's fate had forgotten about her. Day after day, Catherine looked after the house and things were always right for her. The tension was very great, though, for every hour she expected the door to fly open and her fate to appear. Each day she had to go up the mountain with a basket of the finest bread and cheese for her mistress. A tall, dignified personage took the bread from her gracefully each day, and after bowing, disappeared into a cave. One day her mistress told her, "I always have to propitiate my fate in this way. If that fresh bread and cheese were not sent to her, I shudder to think what she might cause to happen to me." At this Catherine began to weep, unable to hide her grief, for she had suffered so much in the last 7 years that she could no longer hide her sadness. "My dear child, what is the matter with you? Tell me at once," cried the kind-hearted mistress, placing her hand on Catherine's shoulder. So Catherine told her the story of her fate's cruelty and continued, "I do not think that I can stand any more of this anguish," expecting her to appear any moment and to tear everything to pieces, as she has done so often. In fact, I would like to go away from here soon, so that I do not bring my fate's destruction upon this house." "Now let me think of a plan," said the noble woman, striking her forehead. "Yes, I have it. When you go up the mountain with my fate's bread, tell her your story and appeal to her to have a word with your fate, that she leaves off tormenting you like this. I'm sure my fate, who is kind, will help you." So next day, when Catherine went up to the mountain with the bread for her mistress's fate, she asked her to intercede with her own fate. "Well, your fate is asleep under 7 quilts just now," said the lady's fate. "But when you come tomorrow, she might be awake, and I'll take you to her." Catherine went away full of hope and slept that night quite peacefully. When she took the bread up the mountain next morning, her mistress's fate took her to her own fate, who lay in a large bed covered to the eyes with 7 feathered quilts. "Now, sister, here is Catherine," said the fate of the noble woman. "Leave off tormenting her so. I beg you to give her a little rest now." Her fate said nothing but, "Here is a skein of silk. Look after it carefully. It will be of great use to you. Now leave me to rest." And she pulled the curls over her head. Puzzled by this, Catherine went home. Her mistress was all agog to know what had happened, but could not make head nor tail of the story Catherine told her. "The silk is worth scarcely anything," she said, "but you had better keep it. It might be of some use, as your fate said." The king of that country who was to marry, and there was much consternation at the royal tailors when it was discovered that no silk of the right color to suit the king's wedding robe together was to be found in the entire kingdom. "Issue a proclamation," said the king. "I must have my robes done in time. Send to the 4 countries bordering my land, send to every quarter of my dominions. Whoever has silk of this color must bring it to the court, and I shall reward the owner of the silk generously." The noble woman heard the proclamation and came to tell Catherine. "Catherine, my child, put on this dress and take your skein to the court. It is exactly the color of the king's tailor is looking for," she cried excitedly. "You will be rewarded most generously, I'm sure." Catherine appeared at the court before the throne. "Your Majesty," said she, "will this silk be suitable for your wedding robe?" "You shall be paid in pure gold for it," said the king. "Bring the scales and we will weigh the skein. Whatever it weighs, you shall have the equivalent in the finest gold of my realm." They brought the scales, but no matter how much gold was put upon the scales, the skein was always heavier. Then the king had larger scales brought, and threw all his treasure onto the scales, and still the skein weighed more. Then, in extreme exasperation, the king took the crown from his head and put it on the scales. At that very second, the scales balanced and the king laughed. All the treasures were given to Catherine, and she became the queen of the country. Afterwards, Catherine, who had suffered so much in her youth, lived to be a very old woman, and was happy until the moment of her death as queen of that 4 country.